You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
It's a new year. Happy New Year, Nathan.
Hey, Happy New Year.
Yeah, did you make any New Year's resolutions?
You know what? After spending so much holiday cheer, maybe saving a little money.
Well, if saving money is a goal for you in 2025, then you should maybe stop spending insane amounts of cash on your wireless bill. And the easiest way to do that is to switch to Mint Mobile.
Oh yeah, you're right. Mint Mobile lets you maximize your savings with plans starting at $15 a month when you purchase a 3-month plan.
Yep. Say bye-bye to your overpriced wireless plans from the big three while still enjoying high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network with Mint Mobile.
You can bring your own phone, keep your same phone number. Mint Mobile makes it so easy to save money with plans just for $15 a month for 3 months.
I love this. To get your new customer offer and your new 3-month unlimited wireless plan for $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/queens. That's mintmobile.com/queens.
Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/queens. $45 upfront payment required, which is equivalent to $15 per month.
New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details.
Hi, I'm Howard Dory.
And I'm Jess Dory.
And we host Plotting Through the Presidents.
Katie and Nathan wanted us to let you know that they use strong language on this show.
So if that's not something you want to listen to, then maybe Queen's Podcast isn't the show for you.
But if you're into that kind of thing, like we are, then you're going to like it here.
And you might also like our podcast, Plotting Through the Presidents, where we dig into lesser-known, often sensational stories of the early presidents, founders, and their families.
It's deeply researched.
And deeply irreverent.
We have a lot of fun.
Almost as much fun as you're about to have here.
Yes, enjoy Queen's Podcast coming up next.
Hi, this is Katie.
And this is Nathan.
And you're listening to Queen's Podcast, the show about women in history. Nathan.
New year, new queens.
New year, new queens. Nathan Foster, happy 2025.
Happy 2025.
Before we got started, I did go ahead and do a 1-card pool for the podcast for 2025.
And that's a 1-card tarot card.
Tarot pool, yeah, for anybody that's new. I got the 8 of Wands, and that is big changes, fast growth. So,
ooh, I love this for us.
So if you're joining us for the first time, welcome, welcome, welcome. And if you're coming back for the first time in 2025, also welcome.
I am looking forward to not drinking as much in January because it's always this time of year because it's like, well, I'm on vacation. I don't have anything else to do.
So my husband and I have taken to calling the week between Christmas and New Year the Bermuda Triangle week.
I love it.
And it was sort of like the Bermuda Triangle week has the same vibe as an airport bar. What time is it? What day is it? Who knows? Is it okay to drink? Yes. So I'm kind of happy to be out of the Bermuda Triangle week at this point.
I know, me too. I am too.
Yes. But Nathan, who is our first queen that we are talking about in 2025?
Oh, I can't wait. It is the incomparable Olympe de Gouges.
Ooh. So what is she famous for, Nathan?
She's an author, playwright, and honestly, one of the first feminist pioneers. She was in the French Enlightenment era.
Oui, oui. We are going to be talking about the French Revolution. I will say up top that this might not be a Queen's 101 episode.
No, this is a little bit of a deeper cut. It might be nice to maybe revisit the Marie Antoinette episode if you aren't History 201 at this point or haven't been listening for a while.
If you don't know a lot about the era, that's okay. I think you'll still enjoy her story because she's interesting. But just a heads up. Also, complete sidebar. Nathan, what do you think about one day redoing the Marie Antoinette episode?
I'm always down for any of it.
she's got one episode, and that's we've changed the format a little bit since then, since she was in our first year. And I think she would easily be 2 or 3 episodes with how deep into the research we get now.
Yeah, because at that point we hadn't done 2-parters. You're right.
We hadn't done any 2-parters when we did her, so we didn't know that that's what we could do. Listeners, let us know if that's something you would be interested in. Yeah. But let's get into Olympe de Gouges' story. But first,
yeah, we got to talk about what we're drinking.
What are we drinking?
So it was the holiday season, and lots of stuff happened. So today we're just going to be drinking wine. However, I do want to give you a wine recommendation.
Okay.
One of my favorite wines, I tend to stray towards a Pinot Noir. Tends to be a little smoother, but my favorite Pinot Noir as of late has been Lapis Luna. It has a really colorful label. You can get it at H-E-B, Katie. The aromas are red, ripe cherries, boysenberry, purple flower, and spices. It's very juicy, smooth, and polished. So very good drink. Even if you don't like red wines that much, this one is a good segue.
I love it. But before we get started, we have a few Patreon shout outs. So thank you so much to brand new Patreon supporters, Sophia and Sarah.
Also, shout outs to Jen and Francesca.
And obviously, thank you to all of our supporters, whether Patreon, any level there, or just anybody that listens or follows us. Thank you so much.
We love y'all.
We love y'all. And now let's get into Olympe's story. But she didn't start off as Olympe de Gouges. She started as Marie Gouges, and she was born May 7th, 1748. So that makes her a Taurus, Nathan. What are some attributes of being a Taurus? Like, what's the personality?
Loyal, hard-headed, reliable. They're very much that energy of, I know what is right and I know what to do. So listen to me. This is how it needs to be done.
Once they have decided something is right or something is wrong, you're probably never changing their mind.
Nope, it's not happening.
And I feel like that's gonna apply here.
Yeah, that hits right on the head, I feel like. On this show, when someone is not born with the name that they're famous for, we usually just stick with the famous name because that's the one you're going to be able to find readily on Google. But before we can understand why baby Marie went on to become the woman Olympe, we need to understand some of her family dynamics first.
Absolutely. Also, quick disclaimer, we're going to try super hard with these pronunciations, but we do want to get them right. But a lot of them are French as fuck. Maybe things that aren't as easy to look up how they're pronounced. And we are from Texas, y'all. Again, we're going to try, but if you could give us a little bit of grace, that would be...
Bless your heart.
If y'all could bless our hearts, that'd be great.
That being said, baby Marie's mom was named Anne Olympe Moise, and Mama Anne Olympe's family was part of the bourgeoisie class. Mm-hmm. And what is the bourgeoisie class? It's just a term for the middle class at the time, more or less. Not nobility, not clergy, also not unhoused and living on the streets.
Right. In fact, some of the bourgeoisie class were just as wealthy as folks in the nobility. And while Mama Anne's family wasn't like rich as fuck, they were doing very well for themselves. For their class and like where they lived, they were not slumming it. They owned, Mama's family owned a textile business, and business was a booming.
Ooh, yes. Mama Anne actually had a formal education, which to us seems like the bar is on the floor. But for this family, it's a sign of status.
Right. The family was from a place in southern France called Montauban, which is about a 6-hour drive from Paris. Now that sounds like a long car ride, but back then, that is a fucking hell of a commute.
Mm-hmm.
The people from Montauban wouldn't have sounded like the people from Paris. One, they spoke in a language called Occitan, and they spoke with a very, very thick regional accent. Occitan is also spoken in some regions of Spain and stuff like that. Not necessarily what we think of as like Parisian French,
Yes. And like we said, Mama's family was doing pretty okay, but not nobility. However, there was a powerful family in town who would later end up as part of the nobility. And this was the Lefranc family. And we're going to take a quick detour to talk about Jean-Jacques Lefranc.
Ooh, can you say that again? That was
Jean-Jacques Lefranc.
Oui, oui. So Jean-Jacques was only 5 years older than Anne Olympe, the mama in the story, but he was her godfather, which babies don't need jobs, but luckily being a godfather doesn't come with all that much responsibility. So Anne Olympe and Jean-Jacques were very close, and they were more or less like childhood sweethearts. And everyone knew they were in love.
However, the Lefranc family wanted their son to marry someone that wasn't just the daughter of a tailor. So they sent him to Paris to go to college. And while he was gone, Mama Anne married a butcher named Pierre Gouges, and they had 3 children, so 1 son and 2 girls. Then, a few years later, Jean-Jacques returns from Paris, and about a year after he returned, Anne Olympe gave birth to a baby girl.
Now, we're not saying, we're just saying. Pierre Gouges' name is on Marie Gouges' birth certificate, but he did not attend the christening. So it was pretty much an open secret that Jean-Jacques Lefranc, who would later go on to become a Marquis, was Marie's father, the baby Marie's biological father.
Or that's what Olympe de Gouges wants us to think. There's a whole rabbit hole you can go down on that.
She's not the most reliable narrator on her life, but that's okay.
But why would she want a name that everyone thinks that's her dad? Like, why would she prefer that?
Yeah.
Well, first off, he's a Marquis, which is part of the nobility.
Yeah.
But more importantly, Jean-Jacques was a writer, a poet, a philosopher. In fact, he famously had a huge beef with the Enlightenment writer Voltaire. Maybe you've heard of him. A huge inspiration from our Catherine the Great episodes.
Yeah, so if you're Olympe and you're wanting to eventually make a name for yourself, are you going to prefer to tell everyone that A, your dad is a Marquis with an ongoing feud with Voltaire, or B, that your dad is some fucking butcher named Pierre?
Also, Olympe would go on to advocate for the rights of illegitimate children for the rest of her life. So, no facts, just vibes. I think she might have suffered some kind of less than stellar treatment from her family. So,
yeah,
because it really would be a cause that was near and dear to her for the rest of her life.
Like, do you remember in our Josephine Baker episode where we talked about how her family treated her like shit because she wasn't black enough, and then white people treated her like shit because she wasn't white?
Yeah.
I kind of get the vibe that that's kind of how her family treated her. Even though they weren't talking about that she was illegitimate, it was like, well, you existing is a stain on our reputation. But it's like, it's not her fucking fault.
Yeah, I know. She's just born.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is the climate that little Marie Gouges is growing up in. And honestly, the rest of her childhood, there's not a lot of information. Some say that Jean-Jacques offered to pay for her to have a formal education, and her mother said no, and so she grew up illiterate. Some say that she was sent to this religious school to learn the basics of like reading and writing and home management that a girl would have gotten at the time.
We really don't know. There's just not a lot on her. But what we're getting at is that she didn't have the best education in the world.
I think she knew how to read and write.
I do too. I think that she was taught how to read and write.
Not in French.
Yeah, exactly.
Which might be why people considered her uneducated, but I don't think she was illiterate.
Yeah.
Her legal dad, Pierre, died when she was only like 2 or 3 years old. So mom had to go back to work as a lady's maid, though it seems like the family was never broke. Like financial struggles, as we hear a lot about during the time of the French Revolution, that's not really, they're not living on the streets. They're not Jean Valjeaning, like stealing bread from the streets or anything. They are okay. So that's positive. Not a flashy life.
No.
Doing fine. Yeah.
Let's fast forward about 14 years. Zoop! Not a whole lot is known about her childhood. Olympe is 16, and her mom is like, hey, there's this well-to-do butcher in town. Her mom has a thing for butchers. There's this well-to-do butcher in town. He needs a wife. His name is Louis Aubry. He's, just 30 years older than you.
Slight difference.
Congratulations, you're engaged.
And Olympe is like, the fuck?
Ugh. Oh,
I know. That was her exact sentiment as well. She was like, not into this in any way, shape, or form. She protested marrying this guy. She really, really didn't want to, but because history is a stone cold bummer, there was nothing she could do about it. Like, what options does she have? She has no autonomy. She could run away, but to what? Live in the streets?
Yeah, not happening. It seems like the Aubrey family was not as well off as Olympe's extended family, and they were giving him a hefty dowry to take Olympe off their hands, which, again, no facts, just vibes. I have to wonder if they were like, who is ever going to want this illegitimate daughter if we don't pay a man to take her off our hands?
Right. And again, like, that is just complete speculation. I didn't read that anywhere, but it kind of makes sense, right?
Yeah, no, it completely makes sense. So like, well, get her off our hands. Here you go.
Later in life, Olympe would put out a semi-autobiographical novel in which the main character is married off against her will. And in it, she writes, "I was married to a man I did not love and who was neither rich nor well-born. I was sacrificed for no reason that could make up for the repugnance I felt for this man."
Ooh.
So yeah, she's not into Louis, to say the least.
Yeah, repugnance is quite a strong word. Despite that, they did have one son together. When Olympe was 18 years old, she gave birth to a baby boy named Pierre Aubry, which furthers my suspicion that at the time there were only 3 men names in France.
Olympe was very unhappy in this marriage. Like, he never grew on her. But the good news is that it didn't last long because Louis died the next year after their son was born. Where she grew up, there was this river called the Tarn River, and it was really prone to overflowing and flooding the whole community. And it was also really good at killing unwanted husbands. So that's what happened.
I love this river. If you're tired of your husband, just go visit the Tarn.
Just go make some kind of like burn incense at the Tarn and be like, "Goddess, please take away."
This isn't suspicious at all. Now our girl is 20 years old and she's a single mother, but don't feel bad for her.
Right.
She would have had a little bit of a nest egg from the dowry her family gave Louis, and we've talked about this plenty on our show, that once a woman is widowed, she has so much more freedom at this point. She has more autonomy on who she can marry. It's easier for her to keep her own money. It's easier for her to keep her own property. Since she's not exactly mourning her husband at this point because she wasn't in love with him, she's not really seeing a downside in this equation.
Right. And this is when Marie Gouges has a rebrand. Marie is gone. Welcome to the world, Olympe de Gouges. She is tired of being a small town girl that no one takes seriously, and she is ready to take her life from meh to fabulous.
And that seems like a good place for us to top off our drinks.
Yes, ma'am.
We'll be right back.
Nathan, what is that shirt you're wearing?
Oh, you mean my see you next Tuesday pink crop top? Isn't it fabulous?
Yes, I absolutely love that. Where did you even get it?
From this really cool site called Empower by Heidi. Here, let me send you the link.
Okay, let me check this site out. Nathan, I love everything on here. Oh, here's your shirt under a section called Damn Fine Tees.
Mm-hmm.
I need this one. Fueled by coffee and feminist rage. Yes, that's definitely me.
I knew you'd love it. Empower by Heidi is not your average clothing company or retail website. They're all about rejecting societal norms, embracing your wild side, and letting your freak flag fly.
Ooh, I am obsessed with everything under the section called Unfiltered Finds.
Mm-hmm.
You know, here at Queen's Podcast, we love the F word. And all the curse words in this section on these products are certainly unfiltered.
Yes, that's their entire vibe. Empower believes that we should reclaim the language and breaking down boundaries, something that I think our sweary listeners will resonate with.
Yes, I really, really agree. And hey, they even do free shipping for orders over $50.
Yep, and Empower is providing a special offer to our listeners, 10% off your purchase with the promo code.
I love a good promo code.
So go to empowerherbyheidi.com and use promo code QUEENS to get 10% off at checkout.
That's EMPOWHER by Heidi.com to get 10% off with the code QUEENS.
This episode is brought to you by Amazon. Sometimes the most painful part of getting sick is the getting better part. Waiting on hold for an appointment, sitting in crowded waiting rooms, standing in line at the pharmacy, that's painful. Amazon One Medical and Amazon Pharmacy remove those painful parts of getting better with things like 24/7 virtual visits and prescriptions delivered to your door. Thanks to Amazon Pharmacy and Amazon One Medical, healthcare just got less painful.
And we are back.
Yes, Olympe is now in a new life who dis moment, and she starts changing more about herself than just her name. It is possible that her possible father, Jean-Jacques Lafranc, would have told her about the Parisian salons, and it appears that in her head, Olympe thought that there would be nothing better in the world than to enter the scene and live life as an intellectual.
Love it.
Okay, girl.
Love it. But unfortunately, she's not ready for that. She is not primetime ready. She's got that very remedial education at best, and that's not going to cut it if you want to be in the salon scene. So it's time to get to work. And if this was a movie, this would be the makeover montage scene where she is staying up all night reading, learning to speak French.
I'm imagining like the scene from Devil Wears Prada. Suddenly I
Yes,
see.
yes.
This is what I want to be.
She's getting
Suddenly
new
I see.
dresses. She has bangs now. Yes, like she is doing the whole rebrand, whole relook, educating herself as well. She's trying to go from Marie to Olympe.
And now we don't actually know for sure what kind of relationship she had with her, or probably dad, Lafranc, but we do know that at the time of his death, he had 25,000 books in his library.
A lot of books.
And he had spent a lot of time in Paris, so he would have known a thing or two about how a lady should look and act when they try to get into that scene in that crowd.
Yeah.
So while we don't know for a fact that he helped her switch her life up, I kind of feel like he did. No facts, just vibes.
Who else was giving her those books?
Yeah, it just seems so obvious that he had to have had a hand in it. Was he the entire thing? Maybe not, but he had a hand.
Even if it was like behind the scenes, I think Lafranc, even if he wasn't actually her father, I think he probably was helping. But again, no facts, just vibes. Now, before we go any further, I think we should kind of take a second to explain the Parisian salon scene. A salon was more or less a party at somebody's house.
Yeah.
but it was actually like so much more than that. When we say party, we're not talking like a DJ and beer pong. The vibe is learning. The vibe is expanding your mind. We're talking, is God real? Do kings have the right to exist? This is the Enlightenment period, which is so, so crucial to the French Revolution, which we'll touch on later. But yes, everybody is dressing to the nines, but we're talking philosophy and literature and poetry.
Yeah, it's kind of maybe a stoner party would be more. No.
I don't know what they were doing.
Fun fact, though, salons were hugely run by women and play a huge part in how women were able to take part in the Enlightenment world. So while a lot of these salons, the main attendees were men, women were really at the center. I wonder why all this would be attractive to a young woman who's always wanted to be kind of the center of attention, but's been pushed to the side. Also, women in salons seems like a fun Patreon episode because I feel like there's so much political influence that women had that was just not reported.
I think that would be interesting to dive deeper into over on the Patreon. So back to Olympe. New books, new hair, new name, who dis? It's time to take Paris by storm. But Paris is really far away. Like, how do I get there? I don't know anybody. Once I get there, where do I live? Where do I stay? How do I support myself?
That's okay because we're about to have a sugar daddy enter the chat. His name is Jacques Beatrix de Rosière. God help us. I hope I said that right.
Oh, I mean, you said it with your whole chest. So.
We're just going to call him Beatrix from now on.
Beatrix.
Now, some people say that they met before she moved to Paris, and some people say that they met after she moved to Paris, but it really doesn't matter. What we do know is that Beatrix was smitten kitten with Olympe, and she seemed to be really into him too. So it was a love match.
Yeah, and he proposed, as one does when you're in love. And he was probably surprised that she said no. She told him, Marriage is the tomb of trust and love.
Oh.
That is dramatic. But basically, I mean, she's saying, like, once we're married, we're no longer equals. You own all my shit. You basically own me. How can I ever trust somebody once that dynamic is put into play? And that makes sense to me.
Yeah, she's very pro-divorce.
Yes.
She's like, women, you don't need to be owned by anybody.
She reminds me a lot of, and I know it's like 100 years later, but she reminds me a lot of Victoria Woodhull. I wouldn't be surprised if Victoria Woodhull, like, read her stuff and
knew something.
Yeah.
Well, if Beatrix was mad about her turning down his proposal, we really just don't know. But they were pretty much together for the rest of her life.
Yeah.
And when she talked about moving to Paris, he'd be like, okay, I got you, babe.
Yeah.
And he would set her up with an apartment, an allowance in Paris.
He was loaded, so.
Yeah, solves that whole problem.
Yeah. So it's super unclear if she moved alone or brought family members or brought her young son. Some sources say that her son and one of her sisters moved with her. Other sources say that her son stayed at her hometown with a caregiver, though we won't really go into it much in this episode, but her son did eventually move to Paris and they had a relationship later. But I don't know if she was part of his upbringing at all. But you know what? If it was a man, we wouldn't be asking about it, so.
Yeah, right. It's so true.
Yeah.
But what we do know is that Olympe de Gouges has hit the scene in Paris, and she is the it girl.
Mm-hmm.
And of course she is. Her name should have been Olympe de Gouges. She's witty, she's smart, she's beautiful. Olympe de Gouges.
I love that. That would be such a good drag queen name.
It would. But how did she immediately get to Paris and start getting all of these invitations to salons?
So once again, it probably had to do with her probable dad, Jean-Jacques Lefranc. He probably sent out letters of introduction. He wouldn't have straight up said, hey, this is my illegitimate daughter, but he would have been like, this is a friend of a friend's daughter. She's really smart. I think y'all will like her. Can one or two of you invite her over and then see what y'all think?
However, this is Paris, y'all. And gossip is a currency.
Mm-hmm.
Before she even stepped her pretty little foot out of the carriage, there were already rumors that Jean-Jacques' illegitimate daughter that he had with some peasant girl was moving to town. Oh, my God.
Oh.
Supposedly, though, their resemblance to each other was so uncanny that anyone who had met him would instantly be able to tell. So her invitations were based more off of curiosity than anything else.
Right. But it's Paris. And like with this group of people, her being an illegitimate daughter almost gave her lore.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't how it was back in her hometown where it was like, you know, the otherism. This one, it's like,
oh, you're dangerous. Yeah.
It makes you more interesting, kind of. And also, no one cared that she was, quote unquote, living in sin with a rich man. It kind of just makes her a courtesan.
Yeah.
It's just like, okay, get it, girl. You know, like you found a man to support your lifestyle. Good for you. You know, all these things that in her hometown would have made her like the slut, blah, blah, blah. Now in this scene, just make her more interesting.
Mm-hmm. It's Paris.
Yes.
Also during this time, she may have had a daughter with Beatrix, but there aren't any records of it. But there might not be if the child was illegitimate and died young. But in that novel that she put out later, that was mostly biographical, the main character, who's kind of supposed to represent her, has a daughter that ends up dying. So maybe it did happen. We just don't know.
Right. One of the most prominent salon hosts in Paris was this woman named Madame de Montesson. Not to be confused with Madame de Montespan.
Yeah.
We did a couple of years ago. Madame de Montesson was secretly married to the Duke of Orleans, which is Orleans, like that's how we say it in America. That would go on to be a huge scandal, but that's just a different story that we don't have time for. But the reason this is important, you know, the Duke of Orleans, he's part of the royal family. And so she is now besties with his secret wife and hosting salons with her. So our girl got in real fast with like the upper crust of this circle.
Yeah. And it's also important because Madame de Montesson was interested in playwriting. She had opened a little amateur playhouse where they would put on productions for their friends, which did eventually grow to wider audiences. And once Olympe was introduced to that world, she was hooked.
She was a theater kid.
Yes, love this.
Marina, not a theater person. A little bit more fast forwarding. Olympe moved to Paris in 1770, but she does not publish her first piece of work until 1784. And there are several thoughts on why. One is her penmanship was awful. She held her pen in a really weird way, which spread the rumors that she was actually illiterate. And like people were like, is this your first time trying to write? I wonder for a couple of reasons. Maybe she was left-handed naturally. And, back then they like tried to like make you not be left-handed. Maybe it's just also her native language. The language was so different. Who knows? Her penmanship was in French horrible. And she would often in the early days dictate to a secretary. And so that also spread the rumors that she was illiterate.
But that wasn't uncommon though for playwrights to use
dictation
secretaries. Yeah. I think Voltaire even did that himself. Like he even had secretaries. Anyway.
But like you got to remember she's self-taught for a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
So maybe she needed time. Maybe she needed that 14 years to feel confident, you know?
Mm-hmm. Another theory is that she was waiting for her biological dad to die because soon after she did, she published a book that we're not even going to attempt to say in French because it's a long title. The title in English is Madame de Valmont's Memoirs on the Ingratitude and Cruelty of the Flacourt family towards her own, which rendered such services to the Sirs Flacourt.
That is the full title, but it's more commonly known as Madame de Valmont's Memoir.
Thank God.
So yeah, this is a novel, so it's fiction.
The title is a novel.
But it's thought to be almost completely autobiographical, with just basically the names changed. So the book is about this rich guy that has a daughter with a peasant girl, and then the two families, the rich family basically shitting on the poorer family for the next few decades, and how fucked up and how it should be illegal for illegitimate children to be treated the way that they are.
This feels like it is her story. So primarily autobiographical.
Yes.
This novel got a lot of attention, but kind of a mixed bag.
Mm-hmm.
Some people thought it was trashy to air your family drama out like that, but let's all be real. Trashy sells, baby. So
Oh my God. Still today, celebrity gossip, I'll be like, oh, these trashy people. Anyway, what happened next?
Katie loves her some celebrity gossip.
I know, it's true. It's a problem.
So, regardless of whether you believed Olympe's story or not, people are buying it.
However, novels were not Olympe's main passion. Our girl, like we said, she's a theater kid. She loved the theater. And she was working on a few plays that she wanted to get into production. And she had a show in mind that really helped get her political agenda out into the world.
Olympe saw herself as a justice warrior for lots of causes, but she really, really hated the slave trade and the practice of slavery just altogether, which, yay, we love this.
Yeah. In 1780s, France was the third largest player in the transatlantic slave trade. The first being Portugal and the second being Great Britain. So, and then they just brought them all to North America. So Olympe was like, hey, that is, that's some bullshit. And she had written essays about how she thought slavery was wrong and any law that treated one group different than any other group of people. She thought that was wrong, but she wanted to really drive home the point and speak to the masses about this injustice that she saw. And so the theater was the way to do that. These plays were the way to do that.
Yeah, she wrote this play called The Happy Shipwreck, and the plot is this. A Black enslaved couple who are in love run away to an island, and after a while, a white couple whose ship sank, they end up on the same island. And even though they help the white couple, as soon as there's a chance to be rescued, the white people turn the Black people in, and they are sentenced to death. So definitely not a rom-com.
Not a cute little happy story. No, The Happy Shipwreck kind of is
not happy.
Not happy. The plot of the play actually isn't as important as the tone of the play, like the underlying story. That this is all very wrong. Hey, slavery is horrible, and we should stop doing this, and we shouldn't have anything to do with it. Because I know the Bible was a big fucking deal back then. When you look at Moses' story with the let my people go, were these people being like, go Pharaoh? Like, how do you look at a text that is so important to your society and just be like, yeah, but the slave owners in that one were the bad guys, but we're different? Like, what?
Well, but at the same point, the Bible does have rules around how to treat slaves and how to transfer that. Like, the Bible does line out how you're supposed to treat slaves. So that is
wait. Are you saying there's contradictions in the Bible?
Yes. But that is exactly what the people in North America and the United States use to justify slavery.
I didn't know that. My mom made me watch the 10 Commandments every Easter.
That is Katie's.
That is my reference point for slavery in the Bible. Let my people go. And the slave owners in that one, or the baddies. But anyway, I've digressed. Slavery bad. Let's quit doing it.
Yeah, and because history is a bag of dicks, this whole play that she put on about, how slavery's bad, that somehow ended up being super controversial.
Yes.
First of all, some of the people that funded the theater with donations, they also had tons of stock in the slave trade. So, Or they had plantations on some French-owned slave states like Haiti. Haiti's a very big French slave state. And maybe some in the United States. Yeah. So before the show even opened, they pulled it.
Well, they tried
to pull it.
Yeah. When they didn't get it pulled, there were huge protests outside the theater. And, a lot of the actors in the show, too, would have probably had benefactors that were rich. So not only were there protests outside the theaters, the actors also didn't play it well. Like, they played it kind of like lackluster and like refused, because their benefactors were being like, yeah. And so it was just kind of a shit show, and Olympe and the theater and everything were getting death threats, basically. Oof. So after 3 performances, the show did get pulled.
Y'all, when we tell you that Olympe became one of the most hated women overnight, that is an understatement.
Yeah.
There was literally a petition to have her sent to prison over this.
What the fuck?
Yeah, and she even was like, what the fuck? And what did she do? Our girl doubled down.
Taurus energy.
This is why I love her. She's like, you just told me I did something wrong that I believe is right. I'm going to keep doing it.
Yes.
In that same year, she wrote a pamphlet covering the exact same topics.
Yeah.
She was basically like, hey, if you've been told your whole life that Black people are inferior by nature, well, you've been lied to. We've chosen to treat them like shit for no reason. And that's the real fucked up thing here.
Yeah.
That's paraphrasing what she said.
Just a little paraphrasing. But because back then white people were taught, that people that aren't white are inferior. And so like and she's just being like, no. Nature made everybody the same. You're making them, you're telling people they're inferior.
It's your fault.
Yes. We love her for this. But her anti-slavery work is actually not what she's most famous for. And when we get back from the break, we will get into her feminist work. Ooh la la.
Flex your business with an American Express Business Gold Card. You'll earn 4 times membership rewards points on your top 2 eligible spending categories, like transit and electronics, each month, on up to $150K in combined purchases per year. Plus, you can now earn 3 times membership rewards points on flights and prepaid hotels booked on AmexTravel.com. Terms and points cap apply. Learn more at americanexpress.com/business-gold. Amex Business Gold, built for business by American Express.
Okay, and we're back, and our girls' plays are not getting published anytime soon after this last one.
But that's not going to stop her. Nope. Her son, who was already in Paris at the time, ended up joining her, and they opened their own theater. So son and mom have a really good relationship, it seems like.
Yeah.
It wasn't the biggest playhouse in town, but it served as a way to get her plays out there.
Right. And while she had established herself as anti-slavery, that wasn't the only topic she was writing about in her plays. A lot of her plays were about how shitty it was to be a woman in France and the world. And like with her other works, people either loved her or hated her. She was becoming a very polarizing figure in the late 18th century France.
And during her time, it was very popular for the quote-unquote big thinkers to publish pamphlets.
Mm-hmm.
These were documents that were too short to be called books, but longer than just an article in a newspaper. And folks would end up gathering the pamphlets and discussing their political ideas. And it was this whole thing about the injustices in the world. It's a very philosophical thing. And Olympe wrote over 60 of these in the 1780s and early 90s.
So obviously we're not going to have time to discuss all of them. But probably the main reason we still know her today is for one pamphlet that she put out in 1791, which in English is called The Declaration of the Rights of Women and the Female Citizen. I think it's important to note that, in French, some words are female or male. It wouldn't have said female citizen when you're reading it in French, but it would have been the female version.
I think it's the word is citoyen and citoyenne.
Yeah.
And citoyenne is feminine. And it sounds exactly the same, and there's only like one letter difference, but she did that on purpose to be like, all right, only one letter separates us, bitch.
Yes. This was in response to something else, so let's get into that.
1789 is widely believed to more or less be the first year that really kicked off the French Revolution. And we're not going to get into the weeds about the French Revolution too much here. The people are just broke. And there's famine. The nobility is not doing anything about it. That's why we get that Marie Antoinette not quote that she did.
She never said that.
In the French government, there was the first estate, the nobility, really rich people. Then you had the second estate, the clergy. And then the third estate, which is just everybody else.
99% of the population.
Yeah. The third estate figured, you know what? This ain't right. This ain't right. We're going to take over. We're the majority here.
Right. And they renamed themselves the National Assembly. And they basically, they took over, they kick out the nobility, and they published a document that was going to be kind of like their constitution to like simplify it for Americans, guidelines for running their shit. And this declaration was called Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen. TLDR, it's like we have in our American Constitution. Is it the Constitution or the Declaration of Independence or whatever?
Declaration of Independence.
All men are created equal.
Well, I mean, it's important to note that the writers of the Declaration of the Rights of Men are the Marquis de Lafayette and Thomas Jefferson.
Who are both in Hamilton.
Yes. That's how Katie knows them.
Both played by the same guy in Hamilton.
Thomas Jefferson is literally like, hey, I've done this before. Let me just write it again.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, but there was a stipulation. So all men are created equally, but only if you are a quote unquote active citizen. And an active citizen was a white landholding man.
It's like, you just disregarded half the people.
Oh, yeah.
More than half.
Women, people who rented instead of owning their homes, so considered the poor. Anyone who was considered to work as a servant. So if you were like, a butler. What? And immigrants or not white people. So it's not as inclusive as it sounds.
Yeah. And Olympe was like, well, I've got several things to say about this. The year is 1791, and the revolution has been popping off for about 2 years now. But the reign of terror that most people remember the French Revolution for, that hasn't quite started. So we're somewhere in the middle.
Right.
And Olympe publishes a pamphlet called Declaration of the Rights of Women and of the Female Citizen, and it's just a yes and to the Declaration of the Rights of Men. So, like, she essentially took it and just transposed it into a feminine narrative. So It was beautiful.
She opens up the argument by saying, men, are you capable of being fair? What gave you the sovereign right to oppress my sex? Which, snap, snap, snaps. Yes. She argues all the normal things you'd expect. So the Declaration is like 17 amendments, basically. She just goes in and changes most of them. Most of them she just changes to say, instead of like all men, it says all men and women.
Yeah.
And she argues all of the things that you would think, like women should be able to vote and women shouldn't become their men's property when they get married. But then there are a few things I hadn't thought about in there before.
For instance, at this time in France, if a woman got pregnant out of wedlock and called out the guy that got her pregnant, and if this dude ended up saying, that's not mine, then the woman could be fined for defamation. And since we didn't have Maury Povich and paternity test at the time, if he didn't want to claim that the baby, he didn't have to claim the baby.
Yeah.
So she was basically like, Olympe was saying, this is bullshit.
Yeah.
We need to change that.
Totally. Probably her most famous statement in the Declaration is in regards to law and punishment. She says, if a woman commits a crime, she gets full punishment of the law. But she's not allowed to be part of making or voting on those laws. The exact quote, in English, obviously, is women have the right to mount the scaffold. They must also have the right to mount the speaker's podium.
I love this argument because it's like, if you're going to be able to cut my head off for political crimes, then at least let me take part in the process.
Spoiler alert.
You're accusing me of the crime. That means I have political influence. So just give me a vote.
Exactly.
Come on. Anyway.
No execution without representation. Yes, for sure.
And then she ends up dedicating this whole declaration to the one and only Marie Antoinette, who at this point wasn't technically in prison, but she kind of was, basically.
She definitely wasn't calling any shots about anything.
No. Marie Antoinette is the most hated woman in the world right now. Basically, Olympe was like, hey, girl, you can turn that all around if you just advance the cause of women, which, I see what she's going for. But at this point, read the room. Everybody's not so happy about the monarchy.
Like when she's saying, I'm dedicating this to Marie Antoinette, she's so hated. And she's the most powerful woman in the country, blah, blah. I get what she was going for, but I don't think she realized how rage makes people quickly jump to conclusions.
Yep.
Some more foreshadowing for you. The dedication, in hindsight, we might call that a mistake. The revolutionaries were like, why is she trying to make us sympathize with the royal family? Is she secretly a monarchist? And in case you missed it, this is a very dangerous time to show any sympathy for anybody with a title, basically.
And remember the reign of terror, where they started lobbing everybody's heads off, basically. That hadn't popped off yet. But it was starting to. And now our girl is officially on the watch list.
As the French Revolution got deadlier and deadlier, Olympe was kind of like a centrist. She wanted equal rights for everyone. She thought constitutional monarchy was the way to go, kind of like how they had in the UK at the time, in Great Britain.
Yeah.
Where there was still the monarchy, but the monarchy couldn't really do anything. It's a checks and balances situation, They couldn't really do anything without the people. She was like, that seems like a good compromise for everybody. She was very, very much against fucking cutting everyone's heads off. But the general public was in a very head choppy place in their life.
Yeah, the vibe was very choppy chop vibes. Yep. When King Louis XVI was put on trial, he had already been forced to abdicate.
Right.
And Olympe at this point wrote, maybe we don't kill him. Maybe we just send him into exile. She's not the only person writing stuff like this, but a lot of them weren't actually publishing it underneath their own names, which another mistake.
Yeah, a lot of people were saying this stuff, but they were just making up a name that was some clever play, wordplay. And she is just like, Olympe de Gouges. And that was a mistake as well. What you should know about the Reign of Terror is that's just not a cute nickname. There was not a whole lot of logic going in. There was absolutely no empathy for people. Shit got toxic, and the different factions started being like, no, I'm more patriotic. No, I'm more patriotic. And people are turning on each other. Groups that used to work together are now working against each other. And this leads to a lot of people getting publicly executed, including some of Olympe's friends.
But our girl in her big, sexy Taurus mouth, she's gonna do what she thinks is right, and you're not changing her mind.
Absolutely
She's
not.
headstrong.
Yeah.
In 1793, she printed a poster that she had hung up around town, floating the idea that, why don't we take a national vote on what kind of government we should have? I personally like the constitutional monarchy, but here's all the other options. And that took her from the watch list to the dunzo list.
Not coming back from that. Her home was searched. And actually, at first, they didn't find anything in her home. But she thought, I have so little to hide, that she brought them to an office that she had rented, where she had all of her writings that she hadn't published yet. These were by no means actual treason. They were mainly drafts of plays and stuff that she was working on.
Yeah, there were several pieces that they didn't like, but the kicker is she was working on a play where Marie Antoinette is planning to take over the army to defend the monarchy. Oh. But then another female character comes on stage and is like, don't you see it's your responsibility to bring the country together, you silly Billy Marie Antoinette?
Silly Billy?
It's not to tear us apart. And at that point, again, read the room, girl.
Read the room, baby girl. Well, I mean, she hadn't published it, though.
I know. Oh, gosh. But
I know.
It was still viewed as being very sympathetic.
The fact that it existed was treason.
Yep.
It kind of reminds me, not really, but it kind of reminds me of 1984, Big Brother's Watching You and the Thought Police, because she hadn't published this. So Olympe was arrested on July 20th, 1793. And by 1793, that is the Reign of Terror was just everywhere. So this must have been fucking scary.
Yeah, that's an understatement.
She sat in prison for 3 months, and she was denied an attorney. They told her, you seem pretty good at talking and arguing points. Why should we waste a lawyer on you?
Ooh.
So she was forced to represent herself. The interesting thing is that play about Marie Antoinette, both her as her defense and the prosecutor used that story in their argument. The prosecutor was like, look, she's trying to make everybody feel sympathetic for the monarchy. And she's like, no, look, I'm trying to make the monarchy see what's good for the country. It didn't matter. The people were in their head shop era. And so she was found guilty of promoting to reinstate the monarchy, which is treason and is punishable by death.
At this point, she does try to say that she was pregnant, but we really don't know if she was or not. They had her tested by physicians who ended up saying that she wasn't.
What do you think what do you think a pregnancy test was in 1793?
Oh, I don't want to know.
Oh. Why, if she was only 2 or 3 months and not showing, what did they do to detect? Never mind.
But anyway, she used ye old baby defense, but it was, that was a way to get her to not get executed.
And it did not work.
Yeah, I would say something like that too, and I don't even have a uterus.
Yeah, I'm pregnant. You? Yeah, where? Olympe de Gouges was executed by the guillotine on November 3rd, 1793, running her mouth to the last minute. As she was led to the scaffold, she said to the crowd, "Children of the fatherland, avenge my death."
That is so punk rock.
That is so punk rock. Which is more punk rock, that or "Smite My Womb," Agrippina?
Ooh.
They're both.
Ooh.
I hope they met up in the afterlife and was like, "What were your last words? What were your last words?"
Let's have a drink. After her death, the leaders of the Reign of Terror really wanted to paint Olympe in this negative light. Everyone said that she was illiterate, mentally ill. In fact, she was pointed at for the exact reason why women can't have the right to vote, which... Okay, look, really, how emotional can they get?
Look how emotional women are. I one time was watching the Women's World Cup, and this man that I know and have hated ever since had the gall to say women are too emotional to play this sport. I'm sorry. Have you ever seen an Italian man play soccer? You breathe on them and they act like you broke their kneecap. Like, what the fuck? Women are too emotional to vote. Look at Olympe de Gouges. Like, feminist rage.
How was she emotional? She fought for slavery and
fought against slavery.
Fought against slavery and tried to, make things better. Oh, she's so crazy.
She's so crazy. So emotional. Yeah.
When women tried to form clubs or groups to demand rights, they would often be reminded, hey, you remember what happened to Olympe de Gouges when she, abandoned her home to meddle in the affairs of men? She was called hysterical, and her name was used to tell people why women shouldn't have rights.
I can't link out to it in the show notes because I saw it somewhere and then I couldn't re-find it. But I did read something that said, like, even into the 20th century, when the suffragette movement was really coming to a head in the United States, that people pointed to Olympe de Gouges as proof of hysteria.
Oh my gosh.
I couldn't find that to link to it again for more details. I just found it that one time. And it's like, oh my God, that is how tarnished her reputation was for 100 years or more. Yeah.
Oh, that's so crazy. Once the women's suffrage came into fashion in the United States in the late 1800s, Olympe de Gouges actually had a resurgence at that point. Yeah. And that's when her legacy really started to change and it spreaded across the world. And now she's regarded as one of the first modern-day feminists.
Yeah, there have been calls to have her entered into the Pantheon. It hasn't happened yet, but a lot of people are talking about it. But all throughout France, there are streets and schools and roads and things named after her and monuments. She is now viewed as a national hero. And so let's raise a glass to Olympe de Gouges.
Oh, cheers.
Cheers, bitches.